So for today's video, I wanted to come on and talk about a new aspect of collecting that I've gotten into over the past year and a half, and that is, as you can see, Newtype magazine. For those who may not be familiar, Newtype magazine is an anime and visual culture magazine from Japan. Still exists today, but the majority of the collection I'm going to show you comes from the late 80s and early to mid-90s and some late 90s. Pretty much for the whole Cell anime era. I happened to find these kind of by surprise. I was looking for some video game magazines, and I came upon a lot of 1989 Newtype magazines. You can see those in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Now, growing up, I had heard of Newtype as somebody who was into video game culture and, to a degree, through other friends, anime culture. I had heard of Newtype, but as you can see, I've really gotten into collecting them. They were always that source, certainly back pre-internet, that source of really up-to-date information on all aspects of Japanese culture, but again, centered in video games, centered in anime and manga, but also expanding out into video games, and you'll see that as we kind of go through these. But, I got those initial three, and then I moved on to collecting many, many more, as you saw as we panned through that shot. And it's really one of the more rewarding aspects of collecting that I've been doing, because in these magazines you essentially have an era encapsulated. That Japanese bubble economy, end of the bubble economy, kind of the late 80s into the early 90s. And of course that's also the era of great anime, of experimental anime, and so much of that art is captured in these magazines. To say nothing of all of the kind of ancillary things that you get, like the latest video game releases, electronics, toys. I had never opened these as a kid. Maybe they were in a comic book shop. I sort of remember the logo, but to see, all of what essentially made its way over here and made up a good portion of my youth, in its original form, makes these very, very interesting. So I want to take you through a Newtype issue. This is an issue from 1995 or thereabout, and kind of get that centered in the shot. Zoom in a little bit, but these magazines have always had the same kind of format. You'll see some English, but these are mostly, Japanese, or 99.9% Japanese, and I'm actually okay with that. I think that adds a kind of authenticity to it, makes it into this interesting artifact. And in the first section you can see typically 15 to 20 glossy pages of art, and I am a huge fan of the art style of this era. I think it is, it has a kind of kinetic energy. It has the sense of being an imaginative human creation, as far as cell anime. Whereas I think some of the later stuff seems artificial to me. But the pages are rich and glossy, and you can kind of, as I'm showing them to you here, see the light reflecting off of these pages. And just as a magazine itself, I think it is of such, uniform high quality. This is, 25-year-old magazine, and it feels new. It feels crisp as you turn these pages. So in a sense, these first 15 pages are like, an art book for a lot less than, you would pay today for a high-quality anime art book. And I find that I can just kind of lose myself in the art. It's just very nostalgic to go back and look at this art style. Now, obviously, you got some text here. It's hard to interpret, at least with my level of extremely rudimentary Japanese. But again, I think that's part of the charm. Sometimes you'll have posters. I don't think this particular magazine has posters in it, but you do get that from time to time. And of course, as a collector, you want the magazines, with the posters in, and I wouldn't pull them out. And then as you go through here, you'll get some advertisements, and I kind of enjoy looking at these advertisements. You get a sense of, what was popular, and to a degree, you kind of introduce yourself maybe to some anime that you haven't heard of from that era, and that certainly happened. In the middle of the magazine, you have, sort of newsprint pages. That seems to be where a lot of the articles are. You have some forums, you have some, what I'm going to guess is independent artwork, and then you get to a manga section. Couldn't quite tell you exactly what is going on in this particular manga, but, you may get, I don't know, 2 of them usually per issue. Then you go to the sales charts, and it's also very interesting to see, what was popular. Discover some Laserdiscs, some music. You have television schedules, which, depending on how deep you want to go into it, is interesting to see what was on and when. And then you get some more feature articles back in the glossy section. These are profiles of voice actresses. And then towards the back, after that, you see here some other articles, advertisements, which, again, are interesting. This particular issue that I pulled out seems to be rather heavy in sort of fanboy stuff, but, I enjoy just seeing what was popular, even though, the stuff in the back may be an advertisement. And as you kind of flip through, again, Laserdisc stuff, you could really get a sense of the culture, get a sense of, the atmosphere around anime at this time. Now, what you also have are these character studies. And again, these are on newsprint, but you get these in a lot of the issues, just taking a particular anime and breaking down some of the character designs, which is, I think, always interesting. Again, you have this, some forums. You can see a look at Japanese electronics of the time, which I find extremely interesting. And I want to look here. Yeah, so these sections tells you every other aspect of kind of otaku visual culture that was interesting. So I'm trying to get to the start of this section. So you have here, popular music in Japan at the time. And then we will turn here and sort of, visual novels and other kinds of, laser discs, things like that. You can see there. Again, here you have more of, how to make art, in this case computer-generated art, toys, toy models, video games. I always like looking at this video game section so you could see what was coming out when. Here we have an article on Tobal number 1, PlayStation 1 game. Again, other toys, collectibles, trinkets, and things like that. So, really every page you turn, if you're a fan of this kind of thing, there's gonna be something interesting for you to dig into on each page. Now, as I was collecting, I of course did come across the Newtype USA magazines. And these magazines came out in the early 2000s till about, I would say, 2007, 2008. These have their own following because, of course, these are the only Newtype magazines you can actually read and understand. I got these in a lot, and sort of flip through here. Same layout, same reading direction as a Japanese Newtype magazine, but these are translated articles, I believe, and then some original articles. Again, I'm not a fan of this particular era or this particular art style, but it's interesting nonetheless to kind of get the Newegg reading experience in English. So lastly, I just want to show you some Animage magazines. This is what I believe to be Newtype's main competitor. Still exists to this day, and as I was searching for Newtype magazines and lots of Newtype magazines, I also came across people selling, a lot or two of Animage. It's the same type of magazine. I would say it's equally rewarding if, again, you're a fan of this era. A little bit more newsprint, not as impressive as Newtype overall, just from a magazine standpoint, but the artwork is good. You can see here, posters of art that appeared in other issues of the magazine. So these are kind of interesting to go through, worth picking up, again, if you're interested in this collecting and in this era. So to conclude here, let me just talk about kind of the collector's market for these, the prices. I started this, like I said, about a year and a half ago, and I picked up the majority of what you see in front of you here for pretty reasonable prices. I bought most of this stuff in lots, and I probably paid for the Japanese magazines, in a lot anywhere between $4 to $5 an issue on average. The U.S. versions I got very, very cheap. I think I got 10 or 11 for about $1 each. Ultimately, in one of the lots that I picked up of those. The prices have gone up. So if you take something like a normal Newtype, like I'm showing you here, that may be $8 to $10 an issue. And then if you have something like this Evangelion, if it's a popular character or popular series, those tend to be between $15 and $20, and those prices are typically, not including shipping. So they've definitely gone up, and I'm kind of happy that, as you can see, I got most of this collection for pretty reasonable prices, which is why I amassed such a large collection so quickly. But I think if you are interested in anime, in Japanese culture, and in particularly this, what I would call, point of origin for so much of the video game culture of the late 80s to, certainly through the 90s, these are invaluable little time capsules, sort of artifacts of an era. And if you grew up in that era, and you have nostalgia for this era of Japanese culture, I would highly recommend that you at least pick some of these up. They are really, really nice additions to anyone's collection who has that interest.